Seismetics, episode 318. It is May 22nd, 2025. My name is Myro. This is the podcast where I ramble on for a bit about some shit. Recording this on a Thursday afternoon / evening. The Western Conference Finals are... Game 2 of the Western Conference Finals are about to start. Pretty much right about now, but just with ESPN's start time, they're always a little late. They're never on time. It's like kind of like public transportation over here. It's always like 10, maybe like 15 minutes late. You know what I mean? It's never on time. But yeah. So I'll be watching that. I'll just kind of let the game roll. I did not talk about game 1 because it wasn't anything too much to note other than it was a close game in the first half, and then in the third quarter the Thunder just kind of put their clamps and just ran with the rest of the game, and the Wolves could never really recover. They just could not make a shot either. They shot incredibly poorly from 3, and the Minnesota bench was also not very good. So just a combination of a lot of things, but I do think the highlight will be the defensive presence that the Thunder had. It was basically a lot of my kind of concerns for the Wolves going into this series was kind of came to life, came to the forefront in game 1. I do hope that they can make it a bit more of a series. It is sort of ugly. It is sort of a it's hard to look at that game and be like, man, I just don't know if they have that much of a chance, right? But you could also point to the Denver series, in which Denver lost by like 50 points in game 2, and be like, oh, the series is over, right? So I think it's very easy and quick to overreact, which I did see a lot of that. But I think it's worth being patient and seeing what the Wolves can do. Because I do think there are some flaws with this Thunder team, right? They can be inconsistent with some of their shot making at times. You could argue that they might sort of let off the gas, and some of their late game, you could argue kind of their late game execution at some points, where it was just like SGA ISOs, which it kind of feels a little, it felt sort of close to some of my gripes with Minnesota's offense down the stretch during the season, where it was just like, let Ant cook, whatever, and that didn't really work out at times in some of the games. And in their losses, it was like, let SGA cook, and he wasn't getting anything done. And the Nuggets were just able to hold on because they had a better when it was a close game, they were able to they just had the tools and the players and the scheming and all that stuff to pull it off. And if you have Jokic, you're kind of able to do that. So I think in a case, if the Wolves are able to keep it close in a similar manner to how Denver was, I do think that they would be able to make it more of a series, but they just have to really avoid making those mistakes, those unforced errors, and just bad shot taking. And I understand that the pressure that OKC puts on the offensive, or on their defensive side is tough to maneuver, but in the first half they were able to do like a decent job. I think like Julius Randle was also, he was hot. He put up like 20 points or something like that, and then cooled off in the second half, but there was something there. You know what I mean? Now it just has to the other players, and of course did not have a good game either. So if he's able to turn it up in this game, then I think we'll have a bit more of a series going, because I do want it to be competitive and interesting, because because the Eastern Conference game 1 with the Pacers versus the Knicks was an absolute banger. I'm really happy that I was able to watch, I would say like a majority of it. I watched the first half kind of by myself, and then later, fourth quarter, I was able to catch that at a bar with some friends, and that was a really fun time. Just like just watching the ending of that. I mean, if you're not familiar, I'll just do I'll do a mini recap, but, the Pacers pull it off again. They do it again. I had this feeling when it was like a minute or so left, and it was like 9-ish points or something. I'm like, this game is still there. It's still there for the taking, and I was just like, they're going to choke. I was just, I was kind of saying it in jest about the Knicks. Like, they're going to choke, like, this is too close. Like, I've seen this happen. I watched the Milwaukee game. I watched the Cleveland game. I saw it happen twice already, these playoffs. And they'll do it again. And then they did it again, right? So it was almost like, it was almost reaffirming what my expectations were for what was going to happen. You know what I mean? I'm like, it would be crazy if they did it again. And they did. Neesmith had like 6 threes in a row, something crazy like that. And then you had Halliburton hit that game-tying buzzer. He thought it was a 3. And he went for the choke move, the choke gesture, with Reggie Miller in the. It's just like everything about that was just perfectly aligned. Like, it was just history, just kind of repeating itself in that point, right? Knicks fans just get like a new batch of Knicks fans who have never experienced, like, really, like, like, this is like maybe for some of them this is like the first time that they're like engaging with this team, and then they get to that point. It's like, yeah, man, welcome, man. This is what this is what it's about. Sometimes it's heartbreak, like I think every fan base at some point experiences that, through the highs and through the lows, and this is one of those lows for fans. Like, you just you get hit with those times, whether it's through, like, periods or years of no success, inability to make it to the playoffs, or in this manner, in like one of the more heartbreaking losses and collapses in NBA history, right? Pacers were down 14 with 2:45 remaining, and no team with those kind of stipulations in playoff history, or just like, I think maybe it was NBA history, or it might have, I don't know, it might have been playoff, or I don't remember. I think it was playoffs. In playoff history, had to ever come back and won a game. So that's something. that is something. But it's really just, there are definitely moments in my mind that are kind of etched in my memory of, like, just like basketball kind of moments that really stick out to me. One of the ones at the very top is going to be the Clay 37-point game. And then some of the other ones that kind of stick out to me, like specific plays, I would say maybe, I don't know. Like, the Warriors ones are interesting because, of course, it's like people talk about like Clay, like Game 6 Clay, but for some reason that doesn't like it doesn't like stick with me for some reason. I do remember like the Steph like 3-pointer. But yeah, outside of that, I just like the Warriors ones. I think about more of, I don't know, like regular season moments, but I do have some playoff moments for sure. Some of the more recent ones, like the Giannis alley-oop from Drew Holiday, that one really sticks with me. And what else? Oh, probably like the Jimmy Butler, I think it was against Milwaukee too, where I think it was like Game 3, where they went up 3-0, or I forgot exactly how it went, but they went up 3-1, I think, in Milwaukee or in Miami, and that was like the Jimmy Butler Miami Heat run. That kind of sticks out, but this one's gonna be there because, like, now I kind of have it associated with me, like it's just different when you're watching it with other people. You know what I mean? It's a different experience, right? Because then that's all kind of tied with your and their memories now, which I think is pretty cool. Just like that bounce, when it hit off the back, when Tyrese's shot, went off the back rim and it went up so high and then it came back all the way down. I've never seen that before. Never, ever seen that before. That's a first-timer. So that being like a novel experience as a fan, and then just like the craziness of it, and just like the sort of the proclamation of the team of destiny for the Pacers. It all just is like tied together. It's crazy. What an experience. So this I will be, like yesterday, which was May 21st. That's gonna be. I'm gonna be thinking about that. I'm gonna be thinking about that for quite some time, because it was just like it was just like a day too. You know what I mean? Like, those are moments where you're just like, you can kind of remember. And it's like, I don't know, it's just different because it's like not, obviously it's not like the Warriors, so it's not my team necessarily, but it's just like the incredible moment of just the comeback with Neesmith just becoming, like a Steph Curry or a Klay Thompson, and then Halliburton to send it to overtime, and just like all those other little moments and stuff. But it's going to be a sort of a day to remember in a lot of ways. And I'm glad that I was able to experience that, and I'm glad I was able to watch that. Yeah, crazy. I think my sort of, what I wonder now is how will the Knicks sort of respond to this, I think. Because like up until that point, they played like a really great game, right? But they just didn't close it out. You just have to close it out against this Pacers team, right? And I think like rewatching the highlights from that game earlier today, like early this morning, I like, you kind of like, you could see sort of like the inception of when Neesmith really started to hit his stride, right? Like, I think in the initial attempts, like his first few that he made were pretty lightly contested, and while the defensive rotations got maybe a little tighter, it was still like too much space for him. Like, they were not guarding him like he had just made 5 threes in a row. You know what I mean? They were guarding him like he was just like, I don't know, man, like he's just another guy, right? And I get it, it's easier said than done, but they were actively looking for him in, the last minute of the game. And, yeah, it just didn't, I don't know. I think there were definitely some errors there on the Knicks' part. But you also just have to credit the Pacers' just incredible shot making, right? Like, it's just, yeah, it's just crazy what they've been able to do this run, regardless of where they end up eventually. Whether it's if they lose this series, which I don't believe is going to happen, I do think that, as I made my predictions last time, I do think that they'll win the series. But even if they lose this series or make it to the finals and lose that, I think this run has been really just something. Like, it's akin to the Miami Heat run of a few years ago. I think that's kind of where, or a couple of years ago, rather. It's going to be, they're going to be one of those teams. It's like, regardless of the fact if they don't win a championship or not, I'll be like, damn, dude, that Pacers team was something. Like, they have been the highlight, I would say, of these playoffs, really. And I mean, they've been the most exciting team to watch, honestly. They've had the best moments so far these playoffs. Out of all of the remaining teams, they just have, in terms of just the actual basketball of it, I think there's a lot to really appreciate about the way they play. It's just unselfish basketball. There's no, Halliburton is sort of kind of the clear leader and, best player of this team. But like I said, he doesn't have to be the best. He scored the most points yesterday for Indiana, but he doesn't have to be that guy every night because they have so many other players, and the way in which they play is so team oriented. It's beautiful. That is what really I think is worth appreciating. You know what I mean? I like the Knicks, but once it does get into the clutch, it's Brunson ball, right? That's just kind of their go-to, and it works so well because he's so good at that. But in terms of just the mechanics and the actual movement of the ball, it's incredibly stagnant, purposely so, but it doesn't make for the most interesting viewing experience, right? You can absolutely appreciate the craftsmanship and the way that he's able to get shots off and just his pirouettes and all that kind of thing, all of his movements to get to the basket and to get to his spots. But I just tend to enjoy just when there is just involvement with, when everybody not necessarily everyone, because it's difficult to get into an offense late down the stretch where you get every single person involved in a touch, right? But just the fact that they're running these plays where they're let's try to get Nesmith open because he's the hot shooter. We don't need to get to Halliburton because he's not the focal point this time around. Or in overtime where it looks like they kind of ran a play to get Obi Toppin open, and he was able to finish with a dunk. Those kinds of things where it's it's not like the ball is going to go to Brunson's hand, right? It's not just this obvious thing. And you have to sort of, obviously you have to credit the coaching staff and all of that. But you also have to credit the players for buying into that and just the communication and all of these things. And I think it's just a lot. It's really something to appreciate. You know what I mean? Where it's like, Halliburton is sort of like the decoy, and then you have someone else, cut. Like, it's just good. It's good shit. Like, you know what I mean? It's really good stuff. And like, I just enjoy watching that type of basketball. And I do think that it is conducive to success, as we have seen. If my predictions line up and it does happen, like, I do wonder, like, how it's too early. Obviously, it's way too early because the series just started, right? And I'm thinking far ahead because the finals don't start until June, but I do wonder what that matchup would potentially look like with OKC, right? I don't think I watched, like, I mean, I don't remember watching any of their regular season matchups. And honestly, it probably doesn't even matter, right? Because as we've seen, it just, there's not, like, sure, there are some things that you can kind of take away from those games, but the style of play is so much different in the playoffs that a lot of the times it doesn't, like, you could have, we saw this with Boston. Like, Boston swept the Knicks in the regular season, and they lost in the playoffs. So it's like, and then, last year, the Phoenix Suns swept the Wolves in the regular season, and then they got swept in the playoffs. So it's just like, it just doesn't, there's not, I don't know if there's, like, a real comparison point. So even if, like, the Thunder, like, blew out the Pacers in the regular season, like, I just don't know how much of that is necessarily applicable in this case. So I do want to check it. I do kind of want to do, like, a little check to see, like, what that, what those games looked like, and if it's even, interesting at all, because they only played twice, right? East and West. So it might be a completely different game once we get to the finals, right? If it does end up being that matchup. So anyways, crazy, man. It's crazy. Again, I'm hoping that this Western Conference final is going to be a little bit more interesting. I do think that game 2 is going to be a bit tighter, and I hope that the Wolves can, tie it up and make it more, just make it more interesting and more competitive, and do better. You know what I mean? I want to see Ant. I know it's hard because the OKC has, like, 1 million defenders, but maybe he's able to pull through and put up some numbers, and the rest of the team follows suit. I was playing basketball yesterday, actually, and I I woke up this morning, my, like, left knee is like sore, and if I try to, like, squat, like, I can feel it, which shows it just sort of continues to show me, like, it's like both, the fact that I am just not conditioned in the same manner that I was, like, 10 years ago, is it's just kind of like me admitting that, obviously age is a factor, and the fact that in order to maintain yourself, you kind of have to do more. You have to sort of do a little bit more, you know what I mean? It's just tough, right? It's just tough with whatever schedule that you have and that kind of thing. But and you want to prioritize some things over others, and, like, while I do want to run, I also recognize that I still have, like, some lingering, sort of injuries, kind of like minor, injuries, fractures or whatever, that I picked up way back in high school and stuff that I have not addressed, which I should. I just hate trying to sketch, like, an appointment with a with a podiatrist and all that. It's just it's a lot, you know what I mean? But it's kind of like a marvel when you watch pro athletes do what they do, you know, with like way more time and just dedication and all that stuff put into it. I mean, of course, listen, when you are a pro athlete, that is your whole life, so you can dedicate like your entire day to like, you know, shooting and working out and doing all of these other things if you have to. So it's just like a completely different scale, you know what I mean? But it's just like I don't know. It's a completely different league, as opposed to just kind of regular exercise, you know what I mean? Like I do consider myself to be like reasonably fit, like I'm in decent shape, but when it comes, like I ran out of breath at times during our pickup games. Like it was just tough, man. Like I just could not, the pace and, you know, just kind of the stop and go action. I was like, man, I just have not conditioned myself to be able to keep up with this normally as I used to, you know what I mean? So to like acclimate back to that is a bit of a process, you know what I mean? I mean, I can't even imagine doing what I used to do back in, you know, high school, where I basically ran every single day for like almost 4 years, which is still crazy to think about. And how, yeah, that's just not possible. It's not impossible. Like I could absolutely commit myself, you know, if I really, really wanted to, I could commit myself to doing something like that. But I understand, like, I just don't have, like, you know, there's like, I talked about this willpower and, you know, the ability for yourself to extend more than you think. And look, I understand that I have the ability to do that. It's just more so like, do I want to? You know what I mean? Do I want to kind of go through that again? And I don't really want to push beyond those limits, for at least in terms of exercise, you know what I mean? 'Cause it's a little unreasonable for someone like myself who doesn't have aspirations of becoming like a pro athlete and that kind of thing. I can do more. I can absolutely do more. I could, you know, I could try to really get back into running if I wanted to, but I think it's setting the expectations so that I can put myself in a position where I can be more fit, but I don't sacrifice, you know, my body. You know what I mean? There's a balance, I think, that can be struck, if I do pursue something like that. You know what I mean? So I think what I'm thinking, I don't know. I just don't have this desire to like push myself in intense exercise right now at this point. But I do want to try to implement some, you know, some moderate pressure to, you know, like run and those kinds of things. 'Cause I do think it's like, listen, man, I do, if I find myself like wanting to, you know, play more games or whatever, and, you know, put myself on the court and, you know, whatever, just do some runs with other people. Like I do want to like listen, it's a little bit like, I don't want to be keeled over while some like 40-50-year-old dude is just cooking me. Like, yeah, like I can't do that. Like that's a little, you know what I mean? Like that's a little embarrassing. So like, I'm not saying that I'll find myself in that position all the time, but if I do find myself in that position, like I gotta be able to keep up with that. You know what I mean? So that's like another thing, right? It's sort of like strength, which I have felt like I've done a decent job of getting better at, like strength training, little by little. Like I think I've, I have neglected my endurance stuff, right? Because again, in the past I have, like, it was predominantly me just running endurance and all that stuff, which it is important. But I do want to try to get that. I want to implement that back into my life a little bit more. It's just, I just have to get into the headspace of really wanting to do that. If I value something, along those lines. So it's just something that I've been thinking about as I walk around with a bit of a sore knee, you know what I mean? Yeah, I think it's, here's another thing that I've been thinking about with, I talked, was it last time? I don't remember. It was definitely like last week or earlier this week, where, the prevalence of NBA players getting injured and that kind of thing, you know what I mean? And how almost easily that can happen. I think in the case of NBA players, like it's more reasonable because it's just like the amount of strain and time and just the, how much you just put on your body going through the motions of playing games like every 2 days or something like that. Like that kind of is like, yeah, no shit, like people get hurt. But it's just kind of like even within that context, it's a bit of a reminder to try your best to take care of yourself in a lot of ways, right? Where, I talked about just like the NBA scheduling and all that stuff, and sure, that is absolutely still an issue. I think if you want to refer it back to just people that are just doing day to day and stuff, right? Yeah, it's just like a matter of just being able to, care for yourself and be able to, if you have, this is something that I've been thinking about in terms of why I have started to do a little bit more strength stuff, right? Maybe not super intense, but, where, like, I don't want to put myself in a position later down the line where I'm much older and I can't handle things. Like I want to be able to like lift things, you know what I mean? I mean, that's a huge thing, right? That's a huge issue with older people where they just do not have the strength to be able to, like carry things and take care of themselves and that kind of thing. So like, I want to be able to do that, right? And I think it's important to be able to do that. I think it's important to maintain and stay strong for the most part. And that's something that I just have in the back of my mind, right? Like, I mean, I know it's not like, I know it's just not a direct correlation between like a Jason Tatum, like, tearing his Achilles and some, just like a regular person, maybe hurting their back or something like that. I just think that there has to be a little bit more, I don't know, there has to be just more care put into yourself and your health. Yeah, because we just don't have, again, another thing, we don't have the privilege of having like sports doctors by our sides either, you know what I mean? I think there has to be a little bit more, like you just like, that's just the unfortunate like financial and like political part of it where you just don't have that availability to you. So in a sense, you and maybe some other people that you have within your circle kind of have to take care of you in a lot of ways. But the first thing is that you have to sort of be able to take care of yourself. So it's important to stay active, you know what I mean? As I don't know, it feels, and I think another thing too is that I am predominantly like sedentary with like my work and stuff. So it's like I'm trying to be more cognizant of that, of the fact that like it's not good to be in place for however many hours and stuff. So like I'm kind of reminding myself to do that, to not fall into not being like lazy, but just being comfortable in a sense, where it can affect my like my ability to take care of myself and be strong, and just the longevity of my life, which is true. That's just just like a fact. So I know it's easier said than done, but yeah, there are measures that people can take so that they don't have to be put in a position of injury and stuff like that. So I don't know what that was. I don't know what my ramble was about, but it's just I've just been thinking about just like bodies and how it's just an important, it's incredibly important, right, for not only yourself, but if you need to, if you have to like take care of other people and stuff like that, it's all important. Anyways, yeah, that was my little ramble. I will talk about, I'll see how I feel regarding the game later tonight. If anything else crazy happens, I don't know. This series doesn't seem to be in the same vein as the Pacers Knicks, but who knows? You never know. Crazier things have happened. So anyways, yeah, I'll do I want to do a two-parter? Yeah, I'll do a two-parter. I'll record either tomorrow or Saturday or Sunday. I'll see how I feel. And yeah, that will be next. All right, recording this on Sunday, May 25th. Perfect timing, actually, to record this. I was thinking of recording yesterday, but actually I'm glad that I waited until the Knicks and Pacers game 3 came to a close, which it just wrapped up about like half an hour or so ago. So yeah, also another exciting game. So both series, we had the Thunder were up by 2. They were up 2-0, and then you got the Pacers up 2-0 in their series. Knicks won today in a pretty, it was a tough game for them. I'll talk about the Knicks first, and then talk about the Wolves game yesterday, which there's not like a ton to talk about because it was a blowout, but we'll get there. But this game by the Knicks was very it had kind of hints of the Celtics series last round, where they were down big and they were able to come back and win it in the clutch in the last in the first 2 games of the Boston series. And this kind of had that similar feel in a way, except I would say the biggest factor that I kind of noticed was the fact that Tibbs played his bench. He played the bench, which I think is kind of a similar theme to the Wolves win on yesterday, where they got some contributions from their bench pieces, including a Josh Hart who slid into that bench role, and essentially kind of came off. He had been, obviously the starter for the entirety of like the playoffs, I believe. I don't think there was like a rotation switch, but Tom Thibodeau decided to start Mitchell Robinson as the center and move Cat to the 4. And in the first half, it didn't really seem like that was working. There was a stretch where Indiana just blew off and went into They just kept turning New York over, and it ballooned to like a 20-point lead for them, and it felt like it was just like, okay, this is it. This is the series, and Indiana was going to go up 3-0. But New York was able to kind of claw back. Again, 20-point leads are kind of nothing, but just in terms of the momentum and the feel of the game, it really felt like Indiana had kind of taken control of this game and the series. But New York was able to kind of claw back. The Mikal Bridges three at the end of the first half, I think, really was kind of was a huge factor where they cut the lead down to about 13, I think. I think that was like a huge, momentum mover going into the second half. And then defensively, New York they just stepped it up in a massive way. I think in stretches of the fourth where Brunson was off the floor because he was in foul trouble, and the New York bench, which was like I think Cat was like the only starter who was included in that lineup, where it was like Cat, Shamit, who else was it? Deuce McBride, and who else was there? DeLon Wright, who I felt like I don't think has played a single minute this series up until now. So like the fact that this has been such including myself, right? I had a whole spiel about Tom Thibodeau and the fact that he's so stringent in not playing his bench. The time that he was really able to kind of lean to them because he needed to, you kind of saw the results. Like Brunson, he was in foul trouble, so that kind of, understandably was why he was benched, but it allowed for him to get the rest he needed, which would allow for him to close out the game. And I think that kind of worked out where, towards the end of the game when they really needed to, close things out, they put kind of their starters, which wasn't their starters because Mitchell Robinson had started, but the five players that they had been starting for the majority of the series, they put out there, OG, Mikal, Brunson, Cat, and Hart, and they were able to close it out at the end there. But I think the defensive effort by New York was like huge in this game. There were moments where the Pacers just could not get like a shot off, get a good shot off. Their offense just kind of went, I would say uncharacteristically, their offense did not, flow through in the way that they wanted to. They tried to feed like Siakam on some ISOs, and he was able to get some shots off, but that was just like not at all in line with how we had seen Indiana operate throughout these playoffs, right? And throughout this series. So I think, the pressure that New York put on them, I think having Deuce McBride especially kind of slot into sort of the point of attack role alongside Mikal Bridges, and I guess OG, you could kind of slot in there as well, really kind of helped propel New York to grind out and get this win. So I thought that was like really impressive. I thought that was really, I'm happy to see this be a series. Of course anything can happen in game 4. If Indiana goes up 3-1, then it's tough. But I do, if you think about it, New York has been in this series in each of the games. Obviously the game 1 collapse was a whole thing. Game 2, Indiana was just kind of able to, pull it off. They had they sort of maintained control at like the end of the game, based on kind of, I wasn't able to watch the game, but just based on my highlights, they had, it seemed like they had pretty good control in the fourth quarter. But regardless of that, it has been an incredibly close game throughout this whole series, which could have gone like either way, obviously, right? Especially with the game one result. But I think that the way in which New York kind of exerted themselves and were able to sort of get into their strengths of pressuring, applying their own defensive pressure on Indiana in a similar fashion to kind of what we saw in Boston, in the Boston series. I think like it's sort of, if you are looking at it from the New York perspective, I think you should feel a little bit more, I don't know. Of course, again, things can change in game three, but the fact that New York has shown fight, especially in this game when they were down by 20, I think is really admirable. And I think that I'm hoping that it will lend itself to a longer series, because I would have been very disappointed if this had gone 3-0 in Indiana's favor. I do want to see a competitive series. Like, it has been competitive in each and every game. So I'm hoping that this will sort of carry it forward, and this will at least go to like 6. You know what I mean? Which has been kind of my prediction for this series. I'm happy to see New York be able to pull off one, and yeah, I'm hoping for a bit more of an extensive series, and I'm glad that it didn't end up in either a sweep or like a gentleman's sweep. So that's good. That's good to see. And yeah, I think I'm really hoping that this will extend beyond just like 5, because I do think New York has had a chance. They've just, the slip up in game one was kind of was sort of the linchpin for the way this series has sort of looked so far. But I think the fact that they were able to sort of regain some semblance of the tough, grinded out kind of characteristic that they've held, especially kind of coming from last year too, even though again they don't have a lot of the personnel from last year. That identity is still kind of there, and I think it was cool to sort of see that come out in this game. So that was pretty cool. Some thoughts on the Timberwolves Thunder game. Same kind of principle, where in Minnesota, they had a very clear plan in terms of applying tons of defensive pressure and really not allowing Shea to get to his spots. The Thunder they were also just not making the shots that they had been in the last couple of games of this series. And you really saw just a lot more intensity and effort from the get-go. Ant had like 20 something. No, he had like 16. I think he had 16 points in the first quarter, right? So he really asserted himself as as leading the charge in this one. And then on top of that, like, you saw contributions from players who had been kind of struggling for this series. Randall kind of stepped it up again after his, brutal showing in game 2. Rudy Gobert had some moments where he had his kind of, signature, defensive moments. And then the bench stepped up as well. Like, bench players, their role players really contributed. They went pretty deep into their bench and brought out Terrence Shannon Jr., who I don't believe played. He might have played like garbage time in game 1 or something like that. He was just like a huge, just like spark plug off the bench. I think he has like a lot of size and athleticism, which I think really works well when playing against a Thunder team who has that in just like, in plenty of doses. So I think seeing that contribution from someone like him kind of tells you like, hey, it's actually pretty good to have some more younger players be able to come off the bench and, provide some athleticism and some effort and some just juice. He had like 15 points or something like that. I think he was sort of kind of a big talking point. Obviously he wasn't necessarily the reason that they won this game, because they had like a 20 plus point lead going into the second half, or second quarter rather. And then, eventually won this game by 42. But he did contribute. I think his presence was definitely felt. And I think there was kind of this added energy that was needed. We will, we'll see kind of what that looks like, where you have sort of these like not random, but lesser known bench players contribute and provide like meaningful minutes in like a specific game. We'll see if that translate into further success in this series, or if like the Thunder are going to kind of game plan against that. But again, I'm happy that in this scenario, in this series as well, it's not going to be a sweep. It's not going to be, hopefully it extends more than 5 games or so. But it feels like this series has some juice as well, right? I think winning in that kind of fashion probably gives Minnesota a little bit more confidence, now that they have some sort of formula. Like, that's the thing though. Like, I feel like the Wolves, in comparison to a team like Denver, are far better equipped to play against this Minnesota team. But because of, of course you have like the the biggest factor in a Jokic with the Nuggets to be able to pull off a potential upset, but their defensive, the way in which they employed like a zone defense in that Nuggets Thunder series really did kind of shake up the Thunder, and that really sort of worked in their favor. And they ran out of gas in Game 7. Like, Gordon was playing on like one leg, and Porter Jr. was playing with one arm. Like, they were banged up, and there was the case where their lack of depth hindered their ability to close that series out. But they were able to really make it tough on the Thunder with their defensive efforts, and they are not a strong defensive team. That has been a huge kind of like detriment against them, and they were able to push that series to 7. So I feel, just if you're comparing personnel to personnel, the Wolves should be better equipped to handle that, and should be able to kind of bring more of that to the table in this series against the Thunder. And I think yesterday's game was sort of the first time that we really saw that, because like the first 2 games we watched, I felt like it just wasn't, I don't know, it just didn't really feel like there was like they didn't really have like a type of game plan to really help them push forward, and to really make it they were able to sort of like hang around, but the Thunder were not really playing all that well in the first halves of those first 2 games. It was really in the third quarter where they really picked it up. It was kind of like the same. It was really kind of a really similar game in both of those games, where the Thunder just sort of turned it up in the third and ran away with it. But it didn't really feel like the Timberwolves were really matching that energy. I do also think that there is a factor in the level of physicality that was maybe allowed in Game 3 versus Game 1 and 2, which, like McDaniels was able to really pressure SGA and get him out of his rhythm and push him out of his spots, right? Also the fact, I think, like, one of the notes that I've heard regarding sort of their defensive pressure was how Gobert was also a factor in limiting SGA's success at scoring the basketball by instead of doing like a drop coverage thing where he backed towards the basket, he was a lot more upfront and if they like switched in like a pick and roll situation, he was there to defend like the mid range, so SGA wasn't able to get off the shots that he was usually able to. So, and also listen, I think I think the crowd and like the Minnesota crowd at Target Center was huge as well. Like they were definitely like a kind of a part of, you know, the Wolves being able to kind of sustain that. I think it's gonna be, the game 4 is gonna be, you know, it's gonna be huge for both of these series, right? I think it's gonna be incredibly tight. I think both games are gonna be hard fought, right? I would be surprised if either of them ended up in like a blowout or something like that. You know what I mean? So I'm hoping that just for, you know, the longevity of these series, that these get tied up. I think if either team goes down 3-1, it's going to be really tough. I'm not saying it's impossible, obviously. Like we've seen teams come back from that. But I would rather, it would give me more confidence knowing that these series are going to go to 6 rather than potentially 5. You know what I mean? So it would be better if both teams tied it up. Again, the series that I want to see is Knicks Timberwolves, just for the storyline and all that stuff. Like I think that would be the most fascinating. I do think that the, you know, Pacers Thunder is more like, I mean, of course it's more likely they're up in their series, but I just think that's might be still the result. I'll again, we'll see how that goes. I just would like to see, I want to see these become longer series. Like that's just what it comes down to. I just want more basketball, you know what I mean? That's really the end all be all. But good stuff. Game 3s. Sure, game 3 for the Timberwolves Thunder was not the most interesting because it was a blowout, but it's going to put a lot of pressure and a lot of stake for game 4. Right? I think in the Thunder's case, it's like, you know, having the series tie up is going to be, you know, obviously they wouldn't really necessarily want that. Taking a commanding 3-1 lead will be the most favorable position. And, you know, I don't know if they necessarily even really, because they just came off like a 7-game series too. So it's like, I'm sure that they would rather clear and just, you know, get the rest that they can if they can, going into like the finals potentially. But we'll see. There's a lot of factors. Wolves play tomorrow. Timberwolves and Thunder play game 4 tomorrow. It's going to be a huge game. I will, depending on the results, I will either talk about it tomorrow. I might talk about it tomorrow night. We'll see. Because I kind of want to do more like immediate reactions and that kind of thing. Because then I can, you know, really give more, not necessarily clear thoughts, but just more immediate reactions. Yeah. So good to see that it's not over. Good to see that neither of these series are going to end up in a sweep. So that makes me happy. And yeah, that's just a quick kind of a little weekend, you know, semi-quick weekend wrap up for the NBA. So yeah, I wanted to talk a little bit more. I was gonna do like a brief update on, you know, some gaming stuff, but I'll save that for maybe tomorrow to talk about it. I just I've been playing, you know, Rogue Legacy 2 and those kinds of things. I'm gonna be going on a trip pretty soon, so on the flights I'll have some time to play some games, and I've taken a little bit of a break from Xenoblade X, but I do want to get back into that. So I've just been like, you know, I want to try to, maybe I'll prioritize story, but there are some like affinity missions that I kind of want to do, and those take a little bit of time. So I've been, you know, haven't. I want to be like a lot more present when playing those kinds of when playing those missions. So yeah, I think when I am traveling, I think I'll probably dig back into Xenoblade X. But yeah, I'll talk about some, my thoughts and what I'm thinking about playing next. I did discuss this like a little while back on a late earlier podcast, but I am still kind of contemplating what my sort of next game is going to be after Xenoblade X. So that's on my docket. I have some things that I've talked about before, but I'm sort of hesitating and deciding whether I actually want to make a purchase on these games. So anyways, that's enough rambling. That's going to do it for this episode. Thanks for listening as always. This has been Save the Semantics, signing off.